I'm Katie, and this is That Grief Relief Podcast, episode 2. Before I introduce my guest for today, I just want to read a review from Apple Podcasts.
Ooh.
I know. Purely because I mentioned Moyo in episode 1. And Moyo very fairly said...
I remember this.
Yeah, Moyo very... What am I trying to say?
I don't know, have another drink.
Moyo...
Very kindly
said that he would give a relevant review on Apple Podcasts after he heard episode 1.
Honest, and I think was the word he used.
Yeah. So this is Moyo's review. A brilliant, light-hearted first episode. I use humour as my defence mechanism as well, so I really like listening to it. I love the fact that you talked and advised about counselling and seeking help, especially for men, which is still frowned upon. I haven't quite jumped onto the podcast bandwagon yet, but I look forward to episode 2. I'll give Oliver 4 stars for the jingle, the spoiler which made me laugh too, and because he's book smart like me. Awesome job, Katie. Witty as always. Thanks. And I stand by my initial 5-star rating. P.S. And this is where I have to offer an official apology. He's not a Man City fan. He's an Arsenal fan. He said, thank you for the shout out, but I'm a gooner. I mean,
Does he apologise for that?
No, for being a gooner, for being an Arsenal fan. No, he doesn't. He should. He really should.
Absolutely.
Right, well, as you've spoken... I will now officially introduce you. So my guest, episode 2. So my guest on episode 1 was my little baby brother, Oliver. My guest for episode 2 is my big brother, Russell Overy. Don't clap yourself.
I was just trying to create more ambience.
Don't do that. Do you ever do that? And the crowd go wild.
Yeah, happens most times.
Hello, all right?
Yes, good. Thank you very much.
Good. We're actually filming this in the morning, so it's a bit weird. I can already hear a leaf blower, and we're filming this for YouTube as well. We don't have the ring light going, so it's just natural lighting, and it's actually terrifying.
My beard looks grey in this. That's weird. Why is it's jet black? What's going on?
You have the weirdest beard colouring of anyone I know, because you have a jet black mustache.
Yeah.
Is it mustache?
Moustache.
Moustache.
I guess. Moustache your question.
and a grey full beard.
It just reminds me of like the westerns, because my beard is so grey. The moustache looks like, Poncho Vera or whatever his name is, like a Mexican bandito.
Oh, right. Yeah.
So, yeah. And
Okay.
when I shave it off, the kids always make me just go with a moustache for a while. So
it's so weird. Anyway, enough.
Just jealous that yours is the same colour all over.
You're just jealous because it isn't two-tone. Right, enough about that. Right, so to explain...
By the way, I'm not grieving my beard going grey.
Why?
I'm comfortable with it.
That could be on here.
It could be, but I have no grief. I have no ill feeling about it.
It is a strange one, actually, because a lot of people, even after episode 1, they said, oh, you said how old you were on episode 1. It doesn't bother me at all. Does it bother you? Not how old I am.
Doesn't bother me in the slightest.
Weird, isn't it? Anyway.
I think that should be the default setting for everybody.
What do you mean?
As in... you're only as old as the woman you feel, or whatever, whatever the expression is.
Never do that again. If you're listening to this as opposed to watching it, you are very lucky. That was the weirdest thing I've ever seen.
No, but age is literally, it's a cliche, but it is a number, right? So it's about your mindset. I know really, young people who are just old.
Yeah.
And I know old people who are young and virile and,
Virile?
Virile. Yes. Do we need to define that term or...
Virile to me means like sexually active. No, is that wrong?
I mean, that's part of it.
Right.
That could be within the definition of it.
Can we talk about dead parents?
Yes.
Please. I'm much more comfortable with that in a really weird way. So, Oliver Page in episode 1 is our half brother. So we have the same mum as Oliver, but different dads. You and I are full brother and sister. Same mum,
Sure.
Same dad, both dead. And a lot of people can see that we have the same mum and dad because apparently we look alike.
It's the beard.
Right. Do you think we look alike?
I don't see it, but I get told it all the time.
Yeah, I do too. I actually remember.
Remember?
remember I worked for a company called Duplays, shout out Duplays, and a friend of yours, in fact, your business partner, Salam,
who I've just met.
Who you've just met this morning?
Yeah.
There you go. Hello, Salam. He came in, and I'd only met him once, maybe 6 months before, and he came in to pay for a football team he had in our leagues. And I was like, oh, hi, I don't know if you remember me. And he just looked me deadpan straight in the face, and he went, yeah, you're Russell with long hair. I was like, right, okay. So, yeah, apparently we do look alike.
Yeah. The other interesting thing as well, when you also do plays, and I was working with DHL, you came in for a meeting.
Yes.
And my manager came and said, oh, your sister's just coming in the car park. I said, how do you know? I said, because she walks the same as you.
What?
And I don't think I've ever told you that. It was like, what, 11 years ago?
Yeah.
Yeah, it's one of those things I thought, I must tell you that. And every time I see her for 11 years, I forget to tell you.
I don't even know either. I was going to say, either you mince.
Yeah, I can mince, yeah.
Or, I don't know, you don't really, I've never noticed your walk. I will now.
Okay.
Right, let's get into the nitty gritty. Have you got somewhere to be?
No.
Is your Apple Watch
I thought I put the theatre mode on.
Yeah.
I have, but phone call came through and I'm trying to switch it off.
That's why I switched off all my notifications on my Apple Watch, because I was in a really important meeting once and it kept on looking up, and my client said, oh, do you need to be somewhere? They weren't being as sarcastic as I was just then. They were very genuine.
I'm trying to get you out of the room.
Yeah, I just didn't realise, because you do. You just have a quick look and it just makes it look like... Okay.
I can deal with it, right? So if it vibrates, then I can just ignore it. But because of our current situation, I was like, I don't want that impacting.
What is it? Oh, this current situation. Right,
yeah,
okay.
Absolutely.
Okay, so I was going to ask you the question as to whether you wanted to talk about losing mum or losing dad, as we lost both. But because Oliver and I spoke about mum last week, I wanted to talk to you about losing dad, because it was a very, very different situation, a very different story.
Sure.
So, I mean, start from the beginning, finish at the end, and tell me all the details in the middle. Okay.
That's a pretty traditional way of going about the narrative.
Yeah.
When you say the beginning, what's the...
Well, he suffered had a very short battle with cancer. So I guess maybe from that phone call.
Okay, all right. So kind of like the last 5 or 6 months that led to his ultimate demise. So I was, funnily enough, I just left DHL. Okay. And as in left the job, not just left the office. It was Ramadan here, and I was still living in Dubai, and I remember that because we'd been out for an iftar in the evening at Bab El Shams.
Fancy.
Gateway to the sun.
It is.
And
fancy though.
I had a missed call from him, and it was like 10:30 at night, and it was rare. I mean, he called me a lot, but rarely at that time of night. Yeah. So when I saw that, I immediately called him back, because I thought that's an odd one. And so I rang him, and I was at home, and just you came in our front door, you'll remember this, by the stairs, there was a tall boy and a clock, and I remember just leaning on top of that tall boy unit and talking to him on the phone, and he just said, I've got something to tell you. I said, yeah. He said, I've been diagnosed with some brain tumours. I was like, oh my God, well, okay. And we have form for this as well, because 2007, 2008? 2008. I had a similar phone call. You reading my mind? No, because I know what you're going to say, because it's the year I moved to Dubai. Gotcha. And I had a similar phone call. I was in a training room delivering some presentation skills training, I think it was. And pick up the phone. He's called me back, and he said, just ringing to let you know. Just ringing to let you know. Oh, yeah. Just ringing to let you know I've got prostate cancer. I was like, oh my God, why haven't you told? Why have you got to this stage of like having not just a diagnosis, but a prognosis and a treatment plan without telling me? And that was his attitude, was like, well, it's my thing. I've got these symptoms. I don't want to turn around to you and say, I've got these symptoms and I'm going to go to the doctor, because then you're just going to be worried about it for weeks or whatever long it's going to be. He said, so I've chosen to go through this process, understand what the situation is, so I can come to you. Rather than you having a million questions, I can just tell you everything. He didn't even tell his wife, our stepmom. He didn't even tell Tina. No. Yeah.
But that's how
he operated, right?
Yeah.
Not in a traditional, boomer generation of I'm going to keep everything inside, but it was very much kind of like, I need to, box this off and not put stress or worry and anxiety onto other people because I can't do anything else to support them.
Quite a pragmatic approach, really.
Yeah, but it was also about other people. So, when he told me that, I realised that obviously something had been going on for at least a few weeks if he was got to this stage. So then, once again, I had questions and he had the answers that I needed at that stage because he'd already gone through the process.
Because I remember in 2008, and that's why I know it's that year, was because I was leaving to England to move to Dubai. And actually, very, very funny story, just to interject, was I was literally leaving the next week. So Mum and Oliver lived in Bournemouth, which is about 2.5 hours drive away from where we lived. I'd gone down to visit them for my last weekend to say goodbye because I was leaving the country. And as I'm driving back, I'm just about to get onto the M27, so a motorway. So there's not U-turns every 5 minutes like there is in the UAE, but once you're on the motorway, you're kind of on the motorway. And I had a phone call from Christian Jaggs. So Christian Jaggs is our dad's best friend's son, who's been like a brother to us.
Brother from another mother.
Literally. And he rang and he was like, "Hi, how you doing?" I was like, "Yeah, I'm okay." And he was like, "Are you holding up okay?" And I said, "Yeah, it's been tough." And it was like an episode of, a soap drama or something where he was clearly talking about one thing and I thought he was talking about me leaving the country and leaving.
A farce.
Yeah. And and he said, "We're going to get through this, And I sort of was like, "Okay, you're really emotional about me leaving the country." And then he said, "Your dad's going to get through this. He's a strong guy." And what are you talking about? And he went, "Have you not spoken to your dad?" I said, "Nope. I'm on the A27. I'm just driving back from my mum's." And he was like, "Oh, Katie, I'm so sorry. You really need to speak to your dad." And I went, "No, Christian, I'm just about to get onto the M27. You need to tell me what's going on." And I couldn't imagine being in his position. He said, "I really wish you'd bring your dad." And he said, "Your dad's got prostate cancer. I'm so sorry. I thought you knew. It's all happened over the last 12 hours or something." And so then I had to drive home. Had another 2-hour journey going, what do I do? I'm not going to move to Dubai. That's it. And that's exactly what I did. I walked in and I said to Dad, "That's it. I'm not leaving. I'm not moving to Dubai. That's it." And Dad was like, "Don't be silly. It's the best cancer you can have. They'll just whip it right out of you." I don't know why I'm making Dad out to be Dick Van Dyke from Mary Poppins, but
mimicking mine from earlier.
Yeah, but yeah. So that was my story, and I remember I still left. And I know that sounds really strange, and people listening now might be like, "I could never have left." But he was fine. He had his operation, his levels all went down and he was in the clear and everything was fine. And I left, and I remember when I moved to Dubai and was living with you, and I had a bit of a meltdown, and you said, you can be there tonight. If you want to go home, you can go home. So whilst, that's...
And that was he took everything in his stride like that, which then, once again, I guess has... lent itself to our characters as well. But it was always very much like he would have hated you to have not done something like that because of him. Because seriously, what would you have done?
Just stayed at home and mourned.
I understand that, but mourned nothing because and that was never his mindset. It was never a question of, I'm ill, this is terminal, or I've got cancer or whatever. It was just a question of, okay, just get on with it, But the if there is anyone going, I don't know if I could do that or I couldn't do that, all I would say, it depends on your relationship with whoever that person is and how you're wired. And all I would say is if that's the decision you've made, I would urge someone to, don't make any judgments on that because you don't know unless you're in that situation. Also in that with those same people, if that makes sense. And as I said to you that time, it's a question of, you can be there home tonight. So what is it? It's a 6-hour flight, drive to the airport, half hour, couple hours at check-in on the other side. So you're talking 12 hours maybe.
Yeah.
You know, and once again, you probably wouldn't have had the same reservations if you were taking a job in Glasgow or Aberdeen, for example.
Why would I do that?
Because I'm comparing the drive.
Right.
You're talking like a 12 to 14 hour drive from there.
Right, okay, sorry. Yeah.
The only illusion is that it's an illusion of control because I'm in the car driving it rather than having to go through the stages of travel.
Yeah,
so,
for sure.
You know, it's I mean, if you were moving to Australia and you were, 2 days away as traveling, or, that might have played out differently.
Yeah, for sure.
But there's no way he would have been very upset if you'd have made any other decision.
Yep. I mean, and he did. He pretty much forced me, and because
he just want to get rid of you.
Yeah, exactly. Well, because our stepbrother Danny moved out here first, and then you moved, and then so he loved us being, getting out of small town England where we were, and has always been very supportive of that. So yeah, he said you've got to go. It's absolutely fine. There was a little issue when I first moved to Dubai when I did want to go back. Do you remember after his operation and my wonderful employer at the time wouldn't give me my passport back?
Oh.
That was fun.
I vaguely remember that, but not clearly.
Yeah, it was just a really random one that they illegally signed my signature on a labour contract. They forged my signature on a labour contract.
Oh, yes, I remember now.
And
I forgot about that company.
So I couldn't
get... Dubai name and shame them.
Definitely not. So I couldn't get my passport back, and then Dad had rung and hadn't given us any heads up and said, just so you know, I'm going to go and have my operation tomorrow. Straight out of the blue. So I went straight down to this office on Sheikh Zayed Road and said, I need my passport now. My dad's got cancer and I need to fly. And this woman, this little troll woman...
And just for running commentary, she's had dry cleaning delivered middle of the day when, of course, everyone's at home, and refused to pay the man because she's in a meeting.
Yes, so this little troll of a woman said, oh, that's remarkably convenient. Your dad's got cancer and that's why you need your passport. Well... I was professional until that point. Yeah, I lost all decorum and went absolutely mental. And then she told me to have some class.
Oh, what was her name? Is she still around?
Awful. Oh. I just couldn't believe it. Anyway, and again, I guess everything happens for a reason kind of thing. The operation went fine. It was fine. I didn't need to travel home. Whatever. So, yeah.
So there you go. 10-minute backstory on getting a phone call.
But it's important.
Absolutely. I just think, that underpinning narrative was why it was almost like training for the real thing.
Oh yeah.
So when he rang me and told me that, I was, like I said, in that mindset of, okay, all right, so if you're telling me this, you know stuff already.
So this is, to bring up to speed, this is in July 2012.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And yeah, so that's he told me that his treatment, or what the prognosis was, but the lesions on his brain was secondary cancer, and they can only treat primary cancer. Mm-hmm. And by the way, if anyone's got any different knowledge in this, please tell me, but this is the information we were given, or certainly that he gave us, is that they need to find the primary site. And they never, ever, ever were able to find it.
Yeah.
And as you know, he went on and had some of those lesions removed from his brain, and actually had a major operation to do that. But they never able to find the primary site of cancer and treat it effectively.
And there was also a point as well where he could have gone on to have all of these tests to find that primary site, but he'd already been told it was terminal. It had spread so far. So we were almost in palliative care stage at that point. So I think he took it upon himself to be like, no, and not in, like you've said before, not in a defeatist way. He was just like, I don't need that. I don't want that. Yeah. If I'm going to die, I'd rather die with a bit of dignity and respect and less pain and on my terms. Yeah, absolutely.
And that was his thing. And I remember going back once very early on, so maybe August or so, and he'd already started having some treatment. I think it was hormone therapy or something. And he'd been out to a Masonic meeting with Steve Jaggs, who's we've already mentioned. And I remember sitting in the front room, and he walked in the door, like into the dining room. And I looked up, and he was incredibly bloated from the drugs. And it was the first time, because I knew he was ill, but cognitively it hadn't really sunk in yet. And it wasn't I was in denial, because I was there, and but it was the first time that I'd seen him, and the gravity of seeing the way he was in terms of just how, really bloated around the neck and stuff like that.
He looked very different, didn't he? Yeah. And
that's when it really dawned on me that just how ill he was, just how serious it was, because of the physical transformation in him. So that was a real, watershed moment for me in terms of, okay, even though I know this is serious, it's really kind of, that's just hit me.
What is that turning point? Because you say that in terms of the physical terms, but because mentally and emotionally, he stayed exactly the same.
Right up until the day, the minute almost he died.
Yeah.
So that was an interesting piece. And, he said that I'm not going to go through all this treatment and have all these operations. I want quality of life. If I've got 6 months left, then it's going to be 6 months that I can manage as best I possibly can. I don't want to have another year or 18 months, just to prolong my life if it's going to be agony and chemo and radiotherapy and all the rest of it. So he was always very adamant about that. Might have been that same trip that we went back with, and I took Mason.
Excuse me.
And Mason, my eldest, was 3 at the time.
It's catching.
Contagious. Either. You are contagious. And then, so we went back and hung around. I got that great picture of them both looking miserable, sitting in that little sofa in the garage, on the little garden sofa, because I think I was making them late for something or other, all sitting like that, grumpy. And I remember after that trip, he said, I'm going to do it. And I said, do what? He said, I'm just going to do everything I can, because I want to spend as much time as I possibly can with Mason. I want to see him grow up.
First grandchild.
Yeah, for as long as possible. And that was really a drive for him. And that's why he went and had, I say one of the reasons, but why he decided to go and do the brain op.
Yeah, so that was quite incredible. I think it's important to say as well, going back to the beginning, is our dad was on the go all the time, relatively fit and healthy, considering the amount of bread and butter pudding he actually ate. But relatively fit and healthy. But my goodness, that man could drive. Like, he would drive. He had a customer, Richard Briggs, in Hull. So how far is the drive to Hull from where we lived?
Oh, no, you're asking me questions now.
8 hours?
300 miles. Oh, yeah, it's probably something like that.
Maybe
I'm just trying to think, drive to Liverpool a lot, but so it's on the other side.
Anyway, so Dad would drive there and back in a day, right?
We drove non-stop to Spain.
Yeah, to
24 hours and 36 minutes.
To our grandparents'
house. Only got overtaken
house.
Twice and got one of them back. That was
that was his story, wasn't it? In his Opel Monza GSE, 3 litre.
4 of us in the car.
And I'm sure to any North Americans and Australians listening, they're like, and
that's my commute.
That's my commute, 8 hours every day. But anyway, the reason why I'm saying that is to set context, is that he could drive for hours and not take a break. And if he had to drive anywhere around the M25 around London and we had to stop to go to use the bathroom, he'd be fuming at us at any road trips. But he worked probably about a 25 minute drive from home. So he worked on the seafront, and
like a fisherman.
He was an old fisherman.
Yeah, so picking up mussels off the beach.
He worked on the jelly deal stand.
Yeah.
Imagine if he did, he'd love it. So he was driving home, and he came over really tired. He was so tired, and he said, I had to pull over. I had to sleep. I was so tired. This is on a 25-minute journey. And again, my wonderful, I like to call it quality of embellishing on stories I don't do it for dramatic reasons. I genuinely forget stories, and I tell stories in a different way, and then someone will go, no, that never happened. So this is my understanding of it. Very, very tired, had a sleep, probably 10 minutes on the side of the road in the car, and went home, went straight to bed. And as far as I understand, is that he was sick. He vomited. And Tina, our stepmom, his wife, called the local GP and said, would you mind coming and visiting Steve. He's not very well. She came out.
I've never heard this.
Oh.
So if you're embellishing, I'm just going to take this as, okay.
Maybe we need to get Tina on. But my understanding is that she came out and...
Drew on his face?
No. Looked in his eyes with the torch thing.
Okay.
And and whatever it was, she said, I don't know, but something's not right. So I believe he was blues and twos, ambulance to the hospital, said, you need to go to the hospital now. And they did scans and found, 8, 9?
I don't know. I think that is an embellishment. I don't think it was that many, but I could be wrong.
47 lesions on the brain. I actually don't know. So I just find it, and I always find, especially when it comes to the git that is cancer, I always find it very interesting, how people find it. I mean, we're in Breast Cancer Awareness Month right now. It's like constantly checking different things, or if it's a mole or whatever. I just found that crazy that he was just tired, and so it was that one of these lesions was kind of putting extra pressure on his brain.
Yeah, I mean, the one thing I do know is that he'd been suffering from dizziness or dizzy spells,
right?
And he'd been to the doctors, or the quack, as he used to call them.
The quack, yeah.
And they said it's vertigo, right? And he said, and this is it's not vertigo, and that's why he never liked to go to the doctors. They're only ever good if you got a broken leg, right? But he said it's not vertigo. He said because he had a friend, Rob, who passed away from brain tumours, cancer as well, and he said he saw Rob go through the same stages.
Yeah.
And he said, I tell you now, it's not vertigo, and that's something else that prompted more tests. So your story of the drive home and the sleep on the side of the road, that might be true as well.
Yeah. But I think it's true. I mean, I haven't...
Just because I haven't heard it doesn't mean it's not true.
Really?
Absolutely.
No, sorry. I meant as in, I'm aware that's the premise of storytelling. Yeah, but you've never heard that story?
No, not until this very point in time.
That's worrying. Okay, so fast forward. Dad's got the bad cancer. We're flying backwards and forwards from Dubai, number of occasions. But we had... To have that time was also incredible. For him to spend that time with Mason as well. Like, we had amazing time. We were very fortunate to have a big garden growing up. So they just spent hours and hours in the garden together and cutting down trees and building bonfires. And Mason then forever, after coming back to England, just wanted to have a wee in the garden because absolutely. He was allowed to have a wee in the garden at Granddad's house. So quite incredible to have that time. How did it affect you being a dad yourself, losing your dad and going through that process of...
It's an interesting question.
Thank you.
I don't know, obviously, because I don't have the other side of it. I don't know if it would have been any different. The strange thing for me is whether you kind of want to refer to it as that kind of whole circle of life thing, or whatever. But I don't know if it made it easier for me.
Okay.
And it's and I don't know how to really describe that. It's almost as if to say, well, thanks, Dad, you got me this far. And I'd much rather, and obviously, Aston. My youngest didn't come along until after he died.
Yep.
I mean, literally like 9-10 months after he passed away. So
right.
it was close, but he never met him, and Aston. I don't have any pictures of Aston with my mum or my dad, right? Which is something that will always be,
or my mum or dad,
or your mum or dad, to be fair. And so that's something that is a shame. But I like the fact, I've got pictures of is there one? Oh no, it's not that one. I've got pictures of Mason with my dad, and and he does remember him vaguely. But it's one thing when he died. I kind of said to myself, actually speaking to him, it's like I'll make sure that they know who you are and they'll remember you. But and once again, the reason I say maybe it was easier for me because I had another focus.
Yeah.
Do you know what I mean? I had to make sure that I was okay, but they were okay, or he was okay as well. And then, like I said, very quickly, my wife got pregnant again. So, we went from that into actually me starting my business like literally like a month later was our first contract dropped, and then she was pregnant, and then so it was a real whirlwind of kind of activity. But I've never actually thought, if I wasn't a parent, would it have impacted me any differently? I genuinely don't know.
Yeah, just an interesting question, because I'm not a parent, and I kind of saw, I don't know, I kind of saw how it affected you with mum, because when mum died first and Mason was only 6 months old. And I don't know, I thought maybe just in my mind, this is going to sound really strange, and maybe this is definitely for another episode, but when mum died, so mum had a very sudden heart attack, so obviously didn't know she was going to die. So she was literally just left as everything was. So in her handbag, she carried a little photo album. And in that photo album were not only a million photos of Mason, of whom she was incredibly proud of, but little things like, I'd sent her one of our, when I started at a new real estate agents here in Dubai, there was a sorry, I just hit my microphone because I'm mega professional. There was a marketing photograph that we had taken, like a mini photo shoot that we had, and I emailed it to her. She'd printed that out just on A4 paper, and it was in there. The first time I'd appeared in the Golf News property section, printed it. So, and she carried that with her every single day. And I was like, this is going to sound really weird, but I was like, wow, she really loved her kids. I know I'm not a mum, so to have that, but obviously what I'm like with my nephews, with your boys, like I love them so much, but it was such a weird thing. And so I kind of then looked at you as that, thinking, okay, well, you were still, you're only 6 months into fatherhood yourself.
Yeah. He was 8 months old, so he was super young. Yeah.
So anyway, I was just wondering whether it had any bearing as well, being that it was, you're a father and losing your father, whether that was anything.
And like I said, because I don't have a frame of reference on the other side of like just not having kids, I don't know if it impacted me any differently.
Talk to me about the day that Dad died. I if you're listening, I will be talking about kind of like my side, and I will interject with some of my memories, but I really want to hear it from my brother's perspective, first of all, from losing both mum and dad. I was already at home. I was...
Define home.
Sorry. Home is England.
Yeah.
So I'd already gone home to England. Steve Jaggs, who we keep mentioning, my dad's best friend, he called in the November and said, I think you need to come home now, to the pair of us. Dad had kind of not taken a turn, but you could see that it was beginning to deteriorate. Yeah.
And at this point, I remember standing in the garden of my house here in Dubai and speaking to him on the phone, and he'd been given, his exact words were to me, I've been told this would be my last Christmas.
Right, okay.
And they've given him till March, April time. Okay. So I think this was probably September, maybe October, because he was still... That was the strange thing. He still seemed fit and healthy and was moving around. He wasn't... still living his life as he always had done. So that was like, okay, so we need to start kind of preparing for the last 6 months. And then, so to get that phone call, literally 3 to 4 weeks later, was like, whoa, I wasn't expecting it to go off a cliff that quickly.
Yeah. So we went home, and I was in a fortunate position that I was able to stay at home. So I was at home from kind of mid-November. So yeah, tell me your story.
I was flying back and forth because I was running a few little bits of training and some team building here. So I was there for a week, and then I'd come back here, and then I'd go back there. And then I had to come back. And one thing, regret is a word that I don't tend to use, but at the time, obviously I needed the money. I was bootstrapping my business and whatever. And I came back to do a team build in the marina. So I flew back for a day's work. Because it was a pretty big job, and obviously it was paying for my airfare and everything as well. So, but I flew back, which means that I'd left for 2 days, and then I was coming back. The only positive is that I was on my own, flew back on my own, but then when I came back, I had nothing lined up, so I knew I was going to be there for the foreseeable. So I brought Mason with me.
Where? Back in England?
Back to England.
Okay, yeah.
Correct, yeah. So I came back. I was on my own in the UK, came back for 2 days to do a bit of work, and then I came back with Mason. So we flew over there, got to the airport, got in the hire car, driving down I think it was A21. And like I said, I was around Sevenoaks somewhere, which is probably about 40 minutes still from where we lived.
Yeah.
And you rang and you said, "Where are you?" And, your tone told me that something wasn't quite right. But obviously I had Mason in the car on hands-free. He was just in his seat in the back. And I said, well, I'm on the A21 and, I'll get there as soon as I can. You said, yeah, get here like now. I think it's exactly what you said, get here now. I might have made that up as well. But then I remember thinking, okay, well, that's fine. But I also remember I saw him 2 days ago and he was all right.
Dad?
Yes, before I'd flown back.
Oh, sorry. Yes, sorry.
We're
yes,
8 years in the past in the story,
I
right?
thought you were talking in the present tense. I was like...
Yeah. And
you'd seen him 2 days before.
I've seen him 2 days before. And he was bedridden by that point, right? And we were having to bath him and help him, either on a commode or to the bathroom and stuff like that. So, but he was still sitting up, watching I'm a Celebrity.
Loved
playing
I'm
with
a
Mason,
Celebrity.
And so I didn't feel any sense of urgency, even after your phone call. Like, I knew I need to get there. Obviously, I wasn't going to be stopping and, picking up some sticks of rock on the way or anything like that. That was, so coming down. But I didn't feel any extra stress about, I need to get there. So drove there. And then I remember pulling up at coming up the driveway and stopping at the footpath up to the house. And I think you came out of the house.
I didn't come out of the house. No, I met you I went to, and I met you kind of just at the porch at the front door.
As I was coming in, yeah. And then, once again, word for word, you'll be able to tell me what you said, I'm sure. But you said, he's taken a turn and he's been asking for you.
Yeah.
You need to go up there now.
Yeah.
And then so I took Mason upstairs and I can't remember. I think the St Michael's Hospice, the palliative care hospice.
Yeah, hospice at home.
The nurse was there, or nurses were there. And I know Tina was there and you, and then basically saying, we're pretty confident he's on his way out, right? To paraphrase. So I was like, took Mason upstairs, and I remember saying, I think you said, let's put on like Jake and Neverland Pirates or something and leave him down here. And I said, no, I don't want to take him up. And so I said, come. And I remember saying, come and say goodbye to Granddad, Now, for 3-year-old, obviously he can't process, hang on, I've just got here, why am I saying goodbye, not hello? And so he just went upstairs and it's the innocence of childhood is a great medicine in that sense, because obviously he didn't understand the gravity of the situation. And he came up and he gave a big cuddle and kiss and then I don't know how long he was up there for. I want to say 10, 15 minutes, maybe tops.
Okay.
But you can see Dad was very restless and didn't seem to be in any pain, but was obviously not comfortable and was like struggling for breath. So we then Mason went downstairs, cartoons and playing with his toys and stuff, and then we stayed upstairs with Dad. So I remember he was lying in bed and you and Tina on the other side of him, and I was kind of kneeling down, holding his hand, and his breathing was getting more shallow. And this is where we talked about this before, and you thought it was a hospice nurse, but I remember the district nurse turning up just to do her normal checks and stuff, and she's like, oh, okay, and she obviously realised that he was gonna die, because she came to like check on him and like give him any more morphine if he needed it, because I had that little pack that was the dispenser for it, and I remember like holding his hand and having my arm around him and him like that, almost like fighting for that. Well, they call it terminal breath, right? Your last breath.
Yeah, your last breath. Yeah.
And it always reminds me of the Monty Python song, when you draw your terminal breath. And I remember you saying to him, and you were kind of tearing up, and you said, "Tell him it's okay. Tell him he can go." And I couldn't do it, and I was like, I can't, and that's, I was getting very upset, very,
excuse me,
crying, but also once again like trying to keep it together. because obviously I've got this man, my idol, was dying in front of my eyes, and I didn't want to give him any reason for concern or upset, because he always used to say to me, don't worry about me when I die. It's not the person that dies, it's the, I nearly had to swear then, but it's the ones they leave behind that you have to worry about. And so I was really mindful of staying strong for him, if that makes sense, because he'd just been a rock, obviously my entire life. I think in the end, I think because I can't even remember for sure, but I'm pretty sure in the end I said, okay, it's okay, Dad, you can go and stuff. Because what I don't know, I wasn't there for, is that you said that he'd taken this turn at like 3-4 o'clock in the morning or something, and by this time it was 3 o'clock in the afternoon maybe,
and that was it. And because we knew you were coming home, there was nothing we could do or say to get you here quicker. I couldn't, it's like when people sort of say, where are you? Like, oh, I'm waiting for the bus. Well, hurry. Okay, I'll wait faster. There was nothing I could have done, and I didn't want to put any undue stress onto you. I knew you were traveling on your own with Mason. So there was nothing I could do. He'd taken this turn in the night, and Tina came and woke me up. And again, I cannot say enough about St Michael's Hospice and the hospice at home nurses. So they came out to help us and sort of calm Dad down, if you like. And and he kept on asking after you, and we were there by his bedside. He kept on asking after you, and I'm like, I'm here, Dad. What about me? Joking. But it was like, where's Russell? And I was like, oh, he's on the plane. And where's Russell? Oh, he's at Gatwick Airport. And where's Russell? And he kept on asking after you. And then it got to a point where, he was really bad. And that's when I called you in the car, and I knew that it would be on hands-free, and I knew that Mason would be there. So I was trying to get across the sense of urgency without panicking everybody. And then, as you said, when I met you walk through the door, when I heard you drive up the driveway, I ran downstairs, and I think I wish I'd done it differently, because I think I'd almost like lost my cool. I'd kept very cool for you and for the situation until then, but I just ran out and just met you and was like, you have to go upstairs. He's really bad, you have to go upstairs. And then I remember kind of trying to distract Mason, like, hey buddy, you right, dude? And you were like, no, just chill, we'll go upstairs, like, it's fine, because you, as you said, you wanted to take Mason up there, and I thought we were going to try and distract him, and I obviously I know we've spoken about this before, but I don't know why at that point I decided to lose my cool. I think it was just because all of a sudden the reality was you were here and I needed to get you in front of him.
You'd done your job, right?
Well, I guess so, but it was just the fact that he was just, and because he knew, exactly as you said, 2 days prior you'd seen him, he knew you were coming back. That bloody man, remembered everything, and he knew you were coming back. So yeah.
But that's the thing, because you're carrying a huge amount of stress in that moment, thinking I don't want him to pass away without seeing Russell, and also without me being there. I would have hated to have turned up 20 minutes after he died. I don't think I would have ever forgiven myself for leaving in the first place. So I think, once again, where you've been carrying that stress since 3 o'clock in the morning, so we're now talking nearly 12 hours, I think knowing that I was there, that then dissipates, right?
Yeah,
and that allows you to, it's almost like a release valve.
It was, an emotional dump. It was just like, and exactly as you say, it wasn't as if I was like, oh, well, you're here now, so ta-da, I'm off down the pub. It was just very much that I knew that Dad would then be at peace, for a cliche. Yeah, no, I get that. And the interesting thing is that, that was December 12th, right? So that was 3-4 months less than he was given. And, I'm convinced, and I'm sure there's someone out there, some psychologist, neuroscientist, that can tell me that I'm right. But I'm convinced that he made that decision himself, and he consciously
ended his own life. I don't mean by way of, completing suicide. I mean by when he knew it was terminal. And, once again, we did see him over those, probably the last 3 to 4 weeks, kind of regress.
Mm-hmm.
And with people who are terminally ill, one of the things that happens from a psychological point of view is their world gets smaller, right? So it is, the entire world is available to me, and then it's my country, my town, my house, my bedroom, my bed.
Yeah.
And it becomes, that's the focus, and they don't want to kind of be outside of that. And that was always his thing. He didn't want to die in a hospice,
Nope.
He wanted to be at home in his bed, surrounded by his family, which is what he did, what he got. But from it's almost from that, September time or October, when he told me that it's terminal and this will be my last Christmas. It's because he was so mentally strong, and he had this mind over matter mantra, mind over matter constantly. I told you before, once we used to have a plating business, and I was down there once and we were wiring up some stuff that going in the plating, and obviously there's acids everywhere, and he had a wart and he had it for a few weeks, and he was like, getting rid of that. And he got a pipette and put acid around it and then pulled it out with a pair of pliers.
Obviously.
So, yeah. I mean, and it was like, so what are you doing? He said, you got to get the root out. Oh my God. But that's just how he was. And when you look at the process that almost he went through, it was quite fascinating to see that. So that piece in that last day when he's taken a turn and has held on them for 12 to 14 hours. Once again, that didn't surprise me, because I think I was there maybe 20, maybe 30 minutes.
If that, before he died.
Yeah. So it was almost like, telling me, once again, we had that conversation as well, but almost like him letting himself go.
Mm-hmm.
And I know there are, stories, and there is evidence and research about people being able to do this, and rather than suffer that indignity of being bedridden and all the rest of it, he was a very proud man.
Absolutely.
Throughout his life. So, once again, to be able to own that was a real powerful lesson for me. And, coming back to your kind of concept here in terms of grief, I think that helped my grieving process a little bit as well.
Okay.
To know that, look, it's coming to us all, right? It's coming to us all. It's the one date that you've got in the diary.
Yeah.
You just don't know when it is. But the fact that he owned it and did it on his terms. And when I say that, I don't mean he would have chosen a terminal illness.
No, yeah, for sure.
But in terms of, okay, that's the straw that I've drawn, and I'm gonna control and own this. And I'm saying not like he was a control freak, but it's like my terms. It's the way
Absolutely.
I'm gonna go.
Yeah.
So that that half an hour, maybe max, of being with him was I was really pleased I was there. And once again, I put that down to him and his strength.
100%, and that's something that I've always very much stood by. He held on for you, and then the minute you arrived, and that he could go and be in a, I don't hate the not at better place, but be at peace, to be, because we've touched on it a couple of times, is that he wasn't in a tremendous amount of pain until,
certainly not that he showed us,
but and when you hear about people that suffer from cancer for years and years and years, and the treatments, I just can't even begin to imagine. So not only did he have a short battle, but as we keep touching on, he was relatively okay.
Yeah.
Probably until the last...
Within himself.
In fine fettle. 3 weeks?
Yeah.
2-3 weeks?
But even then, he was compos mentis. It wasn't like he was... I mean, he started sleeping a lot more, right? And his energy levels had dropped a bit, but, he was still sitting up and bright-eyed and
bushy-tailed.
but it's almost like you just think, okay, you're looking at someone that's going to recover from this acute illness, right? So that was an interesting thing. But yeah, I think, and after that, and once again, perfect timing. It was like serendipitous that the district nurse came up, and once again, as he was more struggling for breath, and she gave him another shot of morphine, and I visibly saw him like that kind of helped him kind of almost like relax into it, for want of a better word. And we were just held him while he passed away. And I remember staying up there. I think I don't know how long it was, but I remember being up there on my own with him. So I think you and Tina had gone downstairs after some point, and I was up there for maybe an hour and a half, 2 hours. And then...
I think you were waiting for the funeral directors, or you stayed with him, didn't you?
Well, we called them, right? But we had no idea how long they were going to be. But I just stayed up there with him, just holding his hand, you know, and it was the first dead body I'd ever seen, you know. It was my old man. And...
First and only for me.
Yeah, I think me too at the moment. We'll see how this podcast goes.
Touch wood.
And yeah, so I sat there with him, and then I started to get this feeling of I want to leave the room. It was almost like I need to leave the room. It's almost like that breakaway, and I need to go and have a moment to myself, even though I essentially was on my own, right? But I didn't want him to be on his own. And I went downstairs and went outside just to get some fresh air. And as I walked out, Mick Murray, and maybe you want to explain who Mick is to fill in the details.
Mike. Dad hated calling him Mick.
Yep.
Mike Murray worked for our dad, and he started working for Dad when he was 16.
When Mike was 16, yeah.
When Mike was 16, yeah. And he started working for Dad when he was 16, and he is now 53.
10 years older than me.
67 he was born, wasn't he? Yeah. Oh, yeah, because Dad was born in 47,
yep.
Mike was 67, you're 77, and Mike's son Alex was 97.
That's right. And then I got it in the neck for not having Mason in
2007. So yeah, Mike started working for Dad when he was 16, and he'd had a bit of a falling out with his mum and dad, something really stupid, and said, oh, can I crash at yours tonight at Dad's house, at our house, because we were still living there at the time.
And then 6 years later...
He was still there. He was still there. So Mike is very, very much part of the family. We're godparents to his children, and very much part of the family. So, and he'd always considered Dad, you know, a second father to him. He had a good relationship with his own family, but because they worked so closely together. And so, yeah, as you say, so you went out to get fresh air, and
he was walking up the pathway.
And Mike had just arrived, yeah.
And he is, he was in obviously he knew Dad was ill and stuff, but I don't think he knew what. Well,
no one had known that Dad had taken this turn.
No, so he didn't know what he was walking into, and then he saw me there, and I just shook my head, and both burst into tears and had a massive cuddle, and then he said, "Can I see him?" I said, "Of course you can see him. He's your dad, basically." So we went upstairs, and he sat, and I remember him just I think he put his head in his chest, and he was just crying, and I said, "Look, I'm just going to leave you." And I felt a little bit better then, because I was leaving Dad with someone else, and I could go and kind of find my own little bit of space. And obviously I still had Mason there as well, so I still had to make sure that he was
I forgot about him.
Yeah.
He was being looked after by Jake and the Neverland Pirates.
Good babysitters.
They are.
So, yeah, so that was it. And then Steve came down. So Steve Jaggs, they live about a 90-minute drive away. Mm-hmm. So he turned up, and we called the funeral directors by then anyway. And I remember just sitting downstairs with Steve, having a scotch, one of my Dad's favourites. Tullamore Dew. Yeah, I think it was.
It would have been.
I think it was, but there was one other that he used to drink as well, and I can't remember what it was, but once again, I'm sure Steve will be able to tell me. And it's the first time I'd ever drunk scotch neat, like nothing else in it, not even ice.
Disgusting.
And I remember, I say the first time, I'd probably tried it sometime, but
when we nicked it out of the drinks cabinet,
I almost felt compelled that I had to drink this.
Really?
The way Dad just, and it was a pretty big shot as well, and I did. I'd sipped it, and it wasn't. I can do it if it's got a fair bit of ice in it.
Okay, yeah.
So I remember that, and just sitting downstairs on the floor with my back against the sofa. I got this kind of vivid memory of that, and then the funeral directors turning up, and because once again it's a relatively small town, Battle, so I knew all the guys.
Down the pub,
because they'd be in the pubs or whatever, and they were just like, funeral directors just have the best sense of humour, right?
I think they have to, don't they?
Yeah, but obviously they weren't coming in cracking jokes. but they were really respectful, and I remember going upstairs with them, and they removed the catheter, and I remember them moving him on the gurney, bringing him down the stairs.
I was in my room at this point. I didn't want to see any of this.
I think it was probably 10, 11 o'clock at night.
I couldn't see him.
Definitely, it was pitch black outside, and then they loaded him in the back of their vehicle, and off they went. That was the last time.
And it was interesting because Dad's dog Barney went for them. He stayed by Dad's bed the whole time. And then when the funeral directors came up to take Dad away, he went for their ankles. He was really, really going for them. Don't you remember? Because I just remember that, like, what is that noise? Like, Barney was going crazy. They were taking away his dad.
Amazing, because I don't remember that.
Yeah.
I remember everything else about that.
I could be making this up.
No, well, I mean, it wouldn't surprise me, but yeah, I don't remember that. That's not to say it didn't happen.
So was that the last time you saw Dad?
Yeah, but both with Mum and Dad, we had the option to see them, either in the mortuary or at the funeral home. Certainly with Dad, it was at the funeral home. And look, with Mum, I ummed and ahed about it because, the day she died, they said, do you want to see her? And I was like, I don't think I do. I was like, I was 32 at the time. So I was like, I should be strong enough to be able to go and see Mum. But I just didn't know if I wanted that to be my memory of her.
No.
And I remember ringing Dad and saying, do you think I should go and see Mum's body? And he said, I can't make that decision for you.
Sorry, interesting interjection, which I think is important. Mum and Dad were separated for 20 years, odd years, 25 years before they both died.
Yeah.
So they weren't together. So you'd rang Dad.
Yeah, and he said, I can't make that decision for you. He said, all I can tell you is that I went and saw my mum when she passed away. And he said, I saw her in the hospital because she died of a heart attack, and I saw her in the hospital, and she was ashen and grey, but my mum. And he said, and then I saw her at the funeral home afterwards, before her funeral, and they done her hair and put her makeup on, and she said they'd really almost like overdone it because they have to lift the tone of the skin and stuff, and he said, and that's the last memory I have of her, and it wasn't my mum.
Okay.
And so, kind of based on that and my feeling of how strong I think I was at the time in terms of doing that, and did I want that in my head for the rest of my life, I chose not to, either of them. I went to the funeral home when Dad was there, and I remember, the guy saying, would you like to see him? He's literally in the next room, like one wall away. And I was like, no, I don't think I do. I was there when he passed away. Yeah. And even that was for me, was a demonstration of just strength and class. I don't know how else to describe it, really. Just even the way he did that. So that's the memory that I held on to.
Yeah.
So that was the last time I saw him, or saw his body, should we say.
And how, again, because you had already experienced huge grief and trauma with losing Mum only 2.5 years prior, this was obviously a different grief process because Mum was a heart attack, and the expression, she was dead before she hit the ground. Dad, we knew, was dying. So how do you think you've literally experienced both? Like, how do you think one differed to the other? Would you prefer to experience one to another, or?
So the interesting thing is the whole processes were very different. So given the choice, if it was me, I'd rather take the dead before it hit the floor, I think.
For you?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd rather not go through, any kind of terminal illness knowing that I've got 6 months, whatever, to live.
Yeah.
But hey, if that's the way it's going to happen, that's the way it's going to happen, right? I can't do much to control that. But I mean, from a selfish point of view, that's in terms of pain and suffering for them. In a selfish point of view, I would take the cancer.
For your grieving of a loved one?
Yeah, it's not. I think, for example, with Mum, if the last thing I'd ever said to her or had a conversation with her was a row or an upset and that had happened, then you got to carry that. And I'm sure millions of people do. Yeah. Carry that for the rest of your life. I'm sure there's people that have gone, I hope you die, and gone out and slammed the door. And then the next thing, that person is run over, heart attack, whatever. And how do you live with that? That's got to be super tough. And then, but with Dad, you that's coming, and
She's just nice for 6 months.
I'm not going to be, in that situation. But also, being able to, like I said, I told you this before, but sitting around the dining room table with him, Steve Jaggs, and Mike Howell, another one of his best friends, who are the executives of his will, going through his will with him. Oh, this is what's going to happen. It was the most surreal experience, and I remember being very mindful of that moment. And I say lots of other factors because with Mum, when Mum died, she was 60, right? So she probably thought, I got a few more years to get my papers in order. So it was a hell of a mess. And I dealt with all of that. So almost,
there was a lot of admin.
There was, and it's not my preferred way of working either, but I think maybe that's part of how I dealt with my grief there, but of almost like project managing the whole thing and really getting into
100%
the detail of it.
That was your...
Where with Dad, because Steve was involved, more so than Mike, who then even stepped out being an executor and stuff, I had none of that. I had no input or no control of that, and it left me feeling a little bit almost like a little boy again.
Okay.
Almost like I'm supposed, this is my dad, I'm supposed to be involved in this, and I wasn't given any say in any of that. And
do you think Dad did that on purpose? I mean, you can't be executor of the will anyway, because you can't, right? Because you're a direct relative.
I don't know.
I don't think so. But
I don't know if he did it on purpose or not. And you know, and look, once again, please don't think, you know, that I'm ungrateful for, you know,
no, that's not.
Certainly Steve did, because I mean, it was just unreal what you know, and what he did.
But would you have wanted to have been more involved, do you think, based on your experience with Mum and her paperwork? Thank you very much for getting a pension, by the way.
I don't know. I think for me, certainly with Mum, it was that element of control that gave me something to cling to, that gave me a rudder. Now, when Dad died, and you know, we had other people to take that on for me, I did have other things. You know, I had Mason, you know, to look after and all the rest of it. So, you know, I did have a different rudder. So I honestly, in hindsight, I can't look back and say I wish I was more involved or I wish I wasn't.
No.
You know, it played out how it played out, and I don't hold any regrets about any of that. It was just, but for you to ask me how I experienced both of their deaths and the aftermath, like I said, it wasn't just the fact that one of them died suddenly and one of them died over a period of time. I also had very different experiences of what happened after their death as well. So,
do you think you had a distraction technique? I'm not saying, well, I mean, in theory it was. So after Mum died, you delving into the paperwork and all of, and the will and dealing with that was your distraction, right? That's how. It wasn't
my distraction. It was engineered. You know, I train companies on stuff, right? So we have, when you look at change management, often one of the models they use in change management is basically the work of Elizabeth Kubler-Ross, who studied grief, right? Okay. And she came up with these, you know, your classic stages of grief, right. You know, denial, anger, you know, bargaining, and moving on to acceptance. Those stages.
There are 7, right?
Well, let's not get into that.
Oh, really?
Because I think originally it was 4 or 5 stages in a change management model. There's 7, but I won't bore you with that too much.
Okay. I would like to touch on it another time, though. But
100%.
Yeah.
But you know, the important thing with this model is that there is these stages that are defined. No one moves through them in the same way, and no one necessarily moves through them in a linear process.
Yeah.
So people might turn around and say, well, I didn't get angry at all. Okay, so either that means you were in denial, or the anger came later, or it didn't come at all, or maybe it came just a little bit, you didn't notice it. Some people get stuck in a stage longer than others, so there's no textbook that says this is how you're going to experience this, but it is nice having an understanding of that framework, right? So my thing was, okay, I know what the framework is, I know what the process is, I'm just going to force myself through it.
Oh, really?
Yeah. Because I thought, well, I'm just going to control it, I'm going to force it. So it was like, give me something to control. And once again, probably that's me in denial, right? It's me denying certainly my grieving process and dealing with it. So I'm just going to force myself out, I'm going to throw myself into this paperwork, and I'm going to deal with these lawyers and fight for these pensions and get, I've never been more organised in my life on anything, because that's not my natural way of working.
I can vouch for that.
But under stress, when people are under stress, you'll often find they'll go to a default setting, or they'll go to a place that's really foreign for them in terms of their kind of natural preferences. So that's what I did with Mum. But I think, maybe that is for another podcast or another episode in a few weeks to maybe get into that. So that helped me. But on the flip side of that, it's not a healthy thing to do, because my grief, probably more so for Mum than Dad, didn't really come out for a couple of years afterwards. And it didn't
even come out until after Dad died, did it?
No,
not?
That's what I mean. It's probably a couple of years after Dad died. Probably 2000, 2014, I very much went into, what I can look back now and label as depression, and at the time when you're in it, you don't label it as that, you don't recognize it, but I remember, I'd get up in the morning and I'd have Mason, this was after Mum died and he was only a bubba, right? So we used to take it in turns on a weekend or whatever, to just have a couple of hours lying. So I'd get up. I just had no energy. I was lethargic all the time. I'd be downstairs with this little, he's just starting to walk and stuff. And then Tina would come downstairs and I'm fast asleep on the sofa. It's just because I had...
Tina, your wife in this
Tina,
instance,
my wife,
not Dad's wife. That is to confuse the issue. Yeah.
So, and it's only looking back with, that wonderful PhD that we all have in hindsight that I can look back and say I wasn't in a healthy place and I didn't deal with my own grief properly. And there's a lot of factors as well, talking about grieving, not just about death. I've had 12 years of stack up everything that can, those 5 to 6 most stressful events in your life. I've had them all in a 12-year period. Yeah. So there was a lot that was layered on the top of that. But going back, I don't know. And this is the thing we talked about before. And I'm sure, I don't know if you've had any kind of people talk to you about what you've been talking about with grief, about I couldn't do that or I would deal with it in a different way. You don't know until you're in it. And it's a very personal piece, right? Even though I know these stages of grief, and I thought, well, I'm going to control this, and I'm going to force my...
I love the fact you had that attitude.
I'm going to force myself through the grieving process. You can't do it. It's going to manifest itself how it's going to manifest itself in you, and it's a very personal journey.
And it's interesting because I believe you grieved very differently between Mum and Dad. So it's not even as if you've recognised grief yourself with regards to death, you go, okay, well, I've done this before. I know exactly how to deal with this. So then the next one comes along. Because this is one of the reasons why I started the podcast. I've experienced a lot of grief, not only with death. I lost 3 friends in the last 2 years. 2 took their own life as well. So, and every single one of them, obviously, because you have different relationships with all of them, but every single one of them, I've grieved in a very different way. We've both experienced other things that make you grieve, and it's you can't. Certainly after Mum died, when Dad died, I was a bit like, well, hang on, I've got different feelings, and I'm grieving in a different way, and why is that? And then you kind of question yourself, and I think that's why it's important to do this podcast and to speak to more people like yourself and other people, which I will be doing further down in the series, is there is no right or wrong way. No. You've got to let it happen. You have to just go through the process. If you want to take guidance from counsellors, grief counsellors, healers, close friends, the one thing I will say is you must speak to people, whomever that may be, in a safe space. It could be a close friend of yours that you are very comfortable crying in front of, for example, because I know some people see crying as a weakness, and that's not a male or female thing. I just think talking about it, talking, and I don't mean that in a professional sense either. I vouch for counsellors. You haven't had grief counselling, as far as I know? No. I was recommended to go to see a counsellor, and I was like, definitely not. I'm not American. This is not a movie. One will not be going to a shrink. And it was fantastic for me.
All I would say just on that, because I've not grief counselling, but other type of counselling, is that I always recommend people, as almost when you go to your first session, maybe your first couple of sessions, almost treat it as an interview. Because each counsellor has a different style and different approach. Yeah. And just because you have a bad experience with someone, that doesn't mean that counselling is not right for you. It might just be that relationship, the rapport or the connection wasn't there as well. Because I've spoken to people that have gone, I had counselling, it was rubbish. Yeah. Okay, so one of 2 things that are at play there, I would say, is either the person wasn't the right person for you, or you didn't give into it in the way you need to. And when I have been to counselling for other things before, it's taken me, certainly the first time, 3, 4, 5 sessions really to kind of understand what am I supposed to do here, because my tendency is just to go blah and just speak, and they just sit there and nod, and you think, okay, well, I'm not getting anything from you, I'm not getting any support. You don't realise that what's going on in the background.
I'm really, really pleased you brought that up, because someone did DM us on Instagram and say about that. I went to see a counsellor, had a bad experience. Now, I haven't... it's a conversation that I'll bring up in another episode, because we ended up having quite a backwards and forwards conversation. This is someone who I don't know, trying to find out exactly that. Why was your... Because it could just be straight up that you just don't gel with that person.
Absolutely.
You might not even like the size of their head. You don't like the clothes they're wearing. But if you go in with any kind of negative connotation... It can obviously have an effect. I went to my first counselling session like a petulant child. I was very much...
So just like yourself?
Yeah. I just went in as Katie Overy. I walked in, I was like, yeah it's me. Yeah. No, I
Do
went...
you know who I am?
Yeah. I've never said that in my life.
I'm not suggesting you have.
Okay, good. Well, it's better than being, are you Russell Overy's sister? Which I've had.
You are.
Yeah, I know, but I've had it for my entire life. I went in almost, arms folded, very blocked off, thinking, I don't care. You're not going to tell me anything I don't already know. You're not going to, I'm just going to sit here. And I'm like, no, you're right. or whatever. And it wasn't, there weren't huge epiphanies. I didn't walk out of each session going, my God, she's a genius. But it made me think about things in a very different way, be it grief and other things that have happened in my life. So, yeah, I'm really pleased that you touched on that.
I think, counselling aside, and I will kind of circle back to it, but the interesting thing is with grief, as an emotion, it's not. Some people say, I haven't experienced any grief. And I remember, I think it might have been Lee Evans, one of our favourite comedians, was like, first the hamster dies. And so you get the hamster, and then you get the dog, and then say, okay, the hamster's dead, dog's dead, come and see your nan, right? So it's kind of like building that up and building that layering of resilience. Maybe coming back to your point about why I dealt with it differently, maybe I had layered that a little bit, with losing mum. I don't know. But one of the things about being emotion is that we all tend to have a shared understanding of what we mean when someone says, I'm really happy, or I'm really sad, or insert emotion here, right? Now, your experience of happiness is different to mine, right? And I can only layer my perception of what I believe happiness is onto you. So, if I think, what do you mean you got all this stuff, you should be happy, that's irrelevant, right? It's not connected to anything material-wise. But when we come to grief, it's the same thing. There's no shared understanding of what that emotion should feel like to you or to me. I know what it feels like to me. And I think different things that I've grieved over, I've experienced different emotions through it. So it's because it has a label, grief. And once again, you have work like brilliant stuff like the Kubler-Ross model. It is, there is a label for it, and there's also stages. So I must experience it in that way. No. It's you're going to go through it in your own personal way. And the time, time's a great healer, but for some people that time is a month. Other people it's 4 years. Yeah. And some people really struggle to get... I still know people now who have lost their parents 15, 16 years ago, and you mention them. your dad's dead, whatever. But, immediately they go to sadness straight away. Yeah. And I think part of what you and Oliver talked about, using humour around that as well, is that when I think of my parents, I just think of the positives that I got from them, and the fun that I had, and the qualities and the luck, the privilege that that I had in my upbringing, and for them, the billion to one choice or chance that we even exist, but they were my direct lineage. So I don't struggle with it in that way, but that doesn't mean just because I can make a joke about having a dead mum or a dead dad, it doesn't mean that you have to do that either. No. You might find it really awkward. You might even find it offensive that I do that. But
absolutely.
All I would say is, in the nice possible way, I don't care if you find that offensive, because that's my parents and my experience. I'm never going to come and make jokes about your dead mum and dad, unless they're the same. But I'm talking to someone else. But unless that's something in the remit of your comfort levels, right?
And that's the interesting thing, is whereby there are still close friends. I mean, I don't know about close friends of yours. You seem to have more professional friends than I do. But certainly with my friends, very close friends, are able to make jokes about my parents. And it's interesting now because I've now included them into this sick little weird circle. So my old co-host on the radio, Joe Mango, who I'm good friends with, even now, if I make a dead parent joke, he'll be like wetting himself laughing. And then these other people who are in this really awkward state are then looking at Joe more than me going, dude, how can you do that? And he's like, no, seriously. So you get to that stage where you just make these people feel comfortable or not. And as you say, you're not going around offending other people's dead loved ones.
But someone said to me once, and it was like, like your mama jokes,
You're right.
And I can't remember exactly what it was, but they alluded to the fact that they'd been with my mum the night before. And I went, oh, that's interesting because my mum's dead. And their response, which was golden, was, that's why she was so cold.
Oh!
Right. now, once
Are you going to name and shame that person?
No, I won't. But for me, that was, I was on the floor, right?
Yeah.
You could listen to what I've just said there, and that for you might be the most disrespectful thing ever. And here's the thing. In that moment, even though I'm pre-wired with my chimp up here to react in a certain way, it's still a choice.
Yeah.
I could choose to be offended by that. But here's the thing. If I wasn't how I was, not just about dead parents, but just generally, I don't think that person would have made that joke in the first place.
100%. Yeah.
So I think it's the fact that, the way I talk about it, and I think probably less so for me than you and Oliver a little bit, but the way I talk about it creates a feeling of safety for other people to have those conversations with me, one about my parents, and also to talk about their own situations as well. But once again, just because I react in that way or I use humour to get through it, that doesn't make me bulletproof in any way, shape or form. I don't mean in the sense that I would be offended by anyone, but like a joke like that. But in terms of the way my grieving process goes, you shouldn't think, oh, wow, that's the way it should be so we can all come out of it laughing. Not at all. Not at all. No. Because I have questioned, should I feel like this? Should it be okay? But I've made my peace with that this is how I'm wired. And the reason I'm wired like that is because of them two.
Yeah.
So it's their fault.
As we circle back around. We're going to wrap it up now because we're over an hour already. But there's so much more that we have to talk about.
My hips and knees were starting to... Oh.
You're just old, though. But you are going to come back on to another episode, which my friend Acacia said to me, is it just going to be your family every week? No, it's not. But that's the whole reason this started. It was because of the way we speak about it and speak openly. So I'm sorry, Acacia. Russell will be back by popular demand. To wrap up, I wanted to touch on something. So each episode, I am going to recommend another podcast or an Instagram account that I like and I enjoy and has maybe helped me.
Go for it.
Or not. So this episode is at Grief Hungry. Now, it's
on Instagram
at Grief Hungry. This account is run by a lady called Laura. She lost her dad in a car accident in 2018. She's very open about it. I don't know Laura at all. It's just what she's put on the account. But it's great. It's just people sharing their stories, and it'll be photos of the person they've loved. But as the account name would suggest, if you swipe on some of the albums, it will show a recipe from their loved one. There is a double secret ingredient French toast by someone's dad. There's also a grilled cheese and tomato soup, which sounds amazing.
Yes, this one. 1 can of Campbell's tomato soup. One can's worth of milk, and you have to check the account for the rest of the recipe.
At Grief Hungry, go and check it out. So wrapping up then, Russell, what meal would you put up on the Grief Hungry account for mum and for dad?
Oh my God, why would you do that to me?
Why not? So a meal synonymous.
I think for mum it would just be, her roast potatoes were amazing.
Oh, so my days. I know Yorkshires.
Yeah. Probably roast dinner.
Okay.
Down for that.
Yeah.
And then for dad, I don't know, it'll always be probably bacon sarnie.
I would have gone with a fried egg sandwich.
Or full English with black pudding.
Fried egg sandwich, because our dad couldn't smell. He had his nose broken when he was younger, had no sense of smell at all. And he said, there's few things I can remember the smell of. That's cut grass, a fried egg sandwich, and Yardley Classic Gold.
Wow. Oh. You just aged this podcast.
If you don't know what Yardley Classic Gold is, aren't you the lucky one?
Yeah.
So yeah, I don't know what I'd go with for Mum, because you say she was a great like home cooking cook, beef stew and dumplings, fry up some roast. But for Dad, it would be a fried.
I don't know if it's because your mum made it, but I remember she used to do these cheese and tomato sandwiches, just cheese and tomato with pepper on it. It was like unbelievable, and I've never been able to replicate it.
Really?
Yeah. But once again, maybe that's the attachment of, my mum's, I'm 30 years old, my mum's just bought me a sandwich, a cup of tea. So, yeah.
Oh, the dream. Thanks very much for coming on. There's been things that I didn't know, and I think there's been things that you didn't know as well about the story. And
maybe things you made up.
Most probably. Yep. I mean, if maybe we might need to rename the podcast.
Lies.
That lying podcast. I had to be careful what I was going to say then. If you have been affected by anything you've heard on here, or you just want to have a chat, please reach out to me on Instagram at That Grief Relief Podcast. You can get me on Twitter, which is at Grief Relief Pod, because we had to have less characters. Or you can send me an email. I'm not even going to edit that.
Good.
That Grief Relief Podcast at gmail.com.
And if you play that bit backwards, you'll hear exactly the same thing. So it's very well done.
Or it could be code for rate me 5 stars. Please hit like and subscribe and all these other things that I've been told to say at the end. I hope you've enjoyed the podcast. Russell Overy, thank you and good night.
Katie Overy, thank you very much and good night. Or good day.